Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session today. You are in for a treat. Good afternoon. And as you come into our LinkedIn chat, Zoom chat, please go ahead and let us know, where are you joining us from? Where are you joining us from? Who are you? And also, if you're feeling extra friendly, go ahead and drop your LinkedIn URL in the chat so we can connect with you. Hi, Nikki. Thanks for joining. You are here today with me. My name is Elizabeth Leiba. I'm a 3-time best-selling author and top voice, LinkedIn top voice in education. I'm joined here by Amira Barger and Vida Johnson. I want to tell you all about these amazing ladies, but first, I want to let you know what you're here for. And if you're in the right place, you are here for the price of nice in the workplace. This is guaranteed to be a real treat. I see California, I see Pennsylvania, and this is going to be super interesting. Think about that. The price of being nice in the workplace. Have you ever thought about that? What the price of being nice is? If you have, go ahead and drop an emoji in the chat because I think about that all the time. Being nice in the workplace sounds harmless until it starts holding you back. We can all probably relate to that. If you can, let me know. This session explores how overvaluing likability can impact your career growth, confidence, and your boundaries, and what you can do to strike a healthier balance. Today, we are going to be talking all about it, the hidden costs of being overly agreeable in professional settings, how to set boundaries without sacrificing relationships, strategies to advocate for yourself, and ways to reduce nice as a strength instead of a limitation. I think we can all relate to that. I want to introduce you to the amazing host for today, the interviewer and interviewee. So this is going to be a really beautiful dynamic, and I'm here for it. Amira Barger is a powerhouse in the fields of strategic communication, health equity, and inclusive leadership with over 20 years of experience spanning public health, nonprofit strategy, and crisis communications. She has carved out a reputation as a thought leader who bridges purpose with impact, currently serving in high-level advisory and executive roles, guiding organizations through complex transformations while embedding equity at the core of every initiative. And she's going to be interviewed today by Vida Johnson, who is a dynamic and purpose-driven leadership development strategist. She's a coach, and she's a transformational speaker committed to helping individuals unlock their full potential through radical self-awareness and personal evaluation. With a strong foundation in leadership psychology, coaching, and empowerment, Vida brings a soulful, no-fluff approach to guiding professionals, especially women and emerging leaders. Go ahead and welcome our amazing guest today, Amira Barker and Vida Johnson. Clap it up for them, guys. Thank you for those heart emojis.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. It's such a pleasure to be here with my friend and coworker by chance, Vida. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. We are excited to dive into the conversation today and to see so many friendly faces. I see so many wonderful, beautiful people that I know. Thank you for your support and for showing up. And hello to all the new faces. And I'll let Vida say hello too.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here to support my dear friend and mentor, Amira. So it's going to be a great conversation today.
Beautiful. I'm going to do some screen sharing today, and Vida is going to ask me some poignant questions. So let's just get right into it.
Now, I like to make sure we get into the most important things first. So when we talk about kind of the price of nice, I have to ask the question, why you? Why are you, Amira, writing and speaking so boldly about the price of nice, especially when so many people, and especially, let's just say it, people of color, are kind of conditioned to go along, to get along? Like, what made you want to confront such a controversial, and I'll even say it, even risky truth out loud?
I love it. Well, I'm going to answer your question with a question to start off, which I actually hate when people do that, but we're going to do it today. So I often ask other people, what radicalized you? And they're like, well, what do you mean by that? I don't know if I feel radicalized. So then I flip it and ask a different question. Well, what was your favorite childhood story? So I'm going to ask our friends who are listening in to go to the chat and tell us, what was your favorite childhood story? My daughter loved Llama Llama when she was little. And I'm going to tell you about my two favorite stories in a second. But first, I want to hear from all of you. What was your favorite story growing up as a child? The one that you would ask for at night all the time, that bedtime story that you had memorized?
Let's see in the
Tell us
chat.
about it. No, maybe it was Little Red Riding Hood, Snow White, Where the Wild Things Are. Ooh, the Velveteen Rabbit. Thank you, Brian. Hi, Brian. I know Brian too. The Balloon Tree. Oh, I don't know if I know the Balloon Tree, Fiza. I gotta ask you about that one. I'll text you. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, classic, Keith. Gotta love it. Oh, Narnia, yes. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Love me some Aslan. Beautiful. Well, for me growing up, some of my favorite stories were Goldilocks and the Three Bears and The Giving Tree. And one of the reasons I ask this question when it comes to the price of nice and why I spent years thinking about a whole book and then spent all of last year and some of this year writing one is because there was just this day one time as an adult where I had this epiphany and this realization that Goldilocks, maybe she wasn't a sweet little lost girl, but maybe she was a trespasser and a thief. And the Giving Tree, maybe it wasn't this heartwarming story and this tale of generosity, but maybe it was this masterclass in toxic relationships and self sacrifice. So I just had this perspective shift as I moved through the world and through life with different tools and new understanding that there isn't a single story, even in these stories. And I had watched a TED Talk many moons ago. I encourage you all to look it up. It's called The Danger of a Single Story. I cannot remember the speaker's name, but she's a beautiful African woman with a lovely accent that just rocks me to sleep. And she does a TED Talk on the danger of a single story. And it hits on some of the same themes I touch on in my book and this sort of epiphany I had in adulthood. And so those realizations flipped something in me. And I started to see how many of the stories that we accept without question shape our behaviors and our beliefs until one day we stop and we think to ourselves, wait, who wrote the story and who wrote the rules and who wrote the outcome and who benefits from them? And then another story I want to tell you came a memorable day when I was all of 9 years old. I'm just going to stay right here for a second. So when I was 9 years old, and it's important for you to know that I am an 80s baby, but the 90s raised me. And way back when in the day, we did not have Instagram or TikTok or any of the fancy social sites. At best, the best technology we had was pagers, and we would use pager code to talk to each other. And so the only surefire way to let the world know that you had just gone somewhere fabulous and that you were so cool was what we called vacation hair. And I know you know what this is, Lavita. But
I
vacation
do.
here. And many others probably know what I'm talking about. But one summer, I was standing in the doorway of my mom's bedroom watching my sisters and I, our two little best friends. They were these blonde haired, hazel eyed twins, and they were sitting cross legged on the floor in my mom's bedroom. And they had just come back from vacation a few weeks prior, and their hair was fresh in their vacation hair beads and braids, right? The little cornrows clacking. Their scalps were bright, beet red, sunburned. And it was a big deal in the 90s because vacation hair was sort of a status symbol. Like you could go somewhere fabulous, and you did. But within days of them coming back from vacation, their hair was this tangled mess. But they loved the vacation hair. And so they were begging my mom, can you please fix it? Can you braid it just like theirs? And they were, talking about me and my sisters. And so my mom was patiently parting their very fine hair. and they were squirming around as they did every year when this happened. And, you know, it was things like, ouch, that's too tight. And why does it hurt so much? And does your hair hurt like this when she braids it? And is my hair falling out? I really think my hair is falling out. And before little 9-year-old Amira, could stop myself, I blurted out, because your hair isn't made for braids. And the entire room, my sisters, my friends, my mom went silent. My mom definitely like froze. She was like a statue. And one of the twins, their head whipped around and their beads flew around like popcorn. And my youngest sister was in the corner and she was trying to stifle a giggle because she knew I was in big trouble. And in that moment, my mom snapped. She said, Amira, that's not nice. And that moment, I tell this story to people all the time because that moment landed really hard for me. And it was in my early formative years that really left a mark and shaped part of how I see the world and part of who I am. Because in that moment, when I told the twins, you know, these braids aren't made for your hair, and they're not. Those braids are really harsh on thin, fine hair. It's not made for that kind of hair, and it will pull it out of your head. I wasn't lying when I said that, right? Their hair really wasn't made for those braids. But I learned very quickly in that moment that it didn't matter if what I said was true, or even if what I said was meant to be helpful, right? The problem wasn't what I said, it was that I said it at all. And so for me, the lesson that day that has to do with the workplace and niceness was that it's not always about truth. Sometimes it's more about comfort. People don't always want honesty. What they often want is silence. And fairness oftentimes isn't even on the table for discussion. And that moment at 9 years old was my first real lesson in what nice actually is. It's not neutral, it's not free. It can be a tool of control and compliance for the things that are expected of us, the behavior that is expected of us. And I often talk about nice as a velvet glove over an iron fist. And once you know it or see it, you can't unknow it or unsee it. So when you, Lavita, asked me why me, why I wrote this book, why I speak so boldly about niceness and about all of the things, quite frankly, the answer is because I lived it. I was raised in a world where niceness was demanded and dissent was punished. And that's very much still the world I live in today. All of us do. But I unlearned it and I'm unlearning it. It's a constant unlearning. And I'm bold enough to say out loud what so many of us have felt, but have been conditioned to swallow. Nice isn't neutral and it isn't free. And this book that I wrote pulls that thread all the way through. I'm deconstructing our cultural obsession with niceness and exposing, I hope, those hidden costs and offering a framework to people to move beyond it, because real equity, real justice, real change, whether it's big change, small change, in between, it requires something more than nice.
Thank you, Amira. That's really powerful that you started researching your book when you were 9 years old. So,
Overachiever.
so no, that's incredibly important in how you shared, like, it's not free and it is costly. Do you have any examples, and of course, sanitized for the public, from any of your recent work where you chose nerve over niceness, like as an adult, of course, and it led to like a positive and how?
Yeah. So I'm going to show you a little picture of little Amira and just let it rest there for a second. But yes, a recent example, I was recently in a team meeting, and I say a meeting, but I really mean a series of meetings because, as you know, because we get the pleasure of doing so much work together day to day and day in and day out, that it has been what we've been living and breathing every day in our work. So it's a series of meetings where teams are struggling with equity initiatives right now, right? The anti DEI bias is real, the pushback is real, and diversity, equity, and inclusion are seemingly dirty words in many ways. And so I was, sitting with a team that was struggling with this initiative that had stalled because of the uncertainty in the world right now and leaders deciding, are we going to stand on our values or not? And the conversation we were having, it kept circling around logistics. We were talking deadlines, resources, who had bandwidth, and it was very much framed as sort of a practical conversation. How do we move this project forward in this moment? But in the room underneath, I could sense that there was something else, that people were frustrated. They were fearful, I think is the correct word, about being associated with anything diversity, equity, and inclusion related in this climate, societally, culturally, and especially within the United States context. And that's not a practical conversation. That's emotional. They wanted to feel safe. They wanted to feel heard and to feel like they wouldn't be punished for doing the right thing, i.e., standing on the values that they and that the company have been purporting for years. And that's where something I learned very recently from a book. I happen to have it right here because I was telling someone about it yesterday, called Super Communicators by Charles Duhigg. I encourage you, in addition to my book, pretty please, pick this one up. But Super Communicators, this is a great book, a really great read. I just got this in, I think, April of this year, and I'm really enjoying it and picking it up multiple times. But in this book, Charles Duhigg talks about something called the matching principle, and it can be really useful to all of us. And so I'll get to what the matching principle is, but instead of pushing harder on logistics, which is my natural September Virgo type A lane, I paused and shifted into emotional conversation mode. I acknowledged what people were feeling out loud, something like, I hear the frustration and the fear in everyone and in the room here. It's real and it matters. And we also can't let that fear dictate whether we stand by our values. We cannot make decisions at the whim of every seat holder in the people's house because it changes so often. And that changed the energy in the room. Once people felt heard, they were willing to re-engage in the practical planning, in the practical conversation. And we moved forward with bolder commitments than we had originally started the conversation with. And it reminded me of that childhood moment we just talked about with the twins and their braids. Back then, I blurted out the truth without matching the conversation that they were having, right? The twins in that moment were having an emotional conversation. They wanted empathy and understanding. I was having a practical conversation, as I almost always am, because again, September Virgo, very type A. I'm like, how do we get to brass tacks on what are we doing here, people? What's the plan? Let's go, let's go, let's go. And so I wasn't wrong in that moment with the twins, but I wasn't effective, is my point, right? And so today, choosing nerve over niceness means that I don't shy away from naming the hard truths, but I try to do it now in a way that people can actually hear. And the matching principle in that book by Charles Duhigg, Super Communicators, which we should all strive to be, is that in any given moment in time, we are usually engaging in one of three kinds of conversations. And I write about this in my book using his framing. Practical conversations focused on solving problems or making plans. That's sort of my default factory setting. I'm practical. I want to get to the plan and a solution. And so I have to really pause and intentionally try to engage in other kinds of conversations because it's not natural for me. And for others, it's a different truth. In that room, back then in the 90s with the braids, the twins were having an emotional conversation, right? I mentioned they wanted empathy. They wanted someone to say, I understand your head hurts here. Let me do this for you. Or just some level of understanding. And, little 9-year-old Amira wasn't willing to go there. And then also social conversations centered on connection and identity. And so I tell people about this framing because it's helpful in every room, in every conversation, every relationship you show up in. This will help you decide, where do I practice nerve in this moment and at what level on the dial? I often explain it to people that way. Am I practicing nerve at a 2 on the dial today or at a 10 on the dial? And it depends. It depends on the kind of conversation I'm in. It depends on the person in the room, and it depends on the topic of conversation, quite frankly, because I'm always calculating the risk of practicing my nerve, because the reality of the world we live in, right? Whether it's losing my job or, really upsetting a neighbor and then having to live with that discomfort and awkwardness forevermore with the next door neighbor over the fence, right? I'm always calculating at what level on the dial am I practicing the nerve today based on the kind of conversation I'm in and having.
Thank you. And I think that this framework is really helpful as well because people will think, oh, opposite of nice must be mean or overly aggressive or like kind of pointed. But it's like, no, no, no. It's matching like, okay, if you're looking at it facts to facts versus if no, this is kind of the connection that they seek.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh, your
in
voice
this
cut out
moment,
for me, Vida.
uh-oh,
Oh, there you're back. No, you're back.
sorry, can
You're
you hear
back.
me now? Okay. Of course, technical difficulties, but thank you. You often talk about the importance of not waiting for permission to do equity work. So, in this moment in time, when the stakes are incredibly high and we're
Mm-hmm.
receiving resistance from all over the place, what does it look like to really lead with urgency? And then, what's the cost of kind of waiting and seeing?
Yeah. So with this question, I want to help impart some additional tools to folks and also talk about what I mean by nice, which is always important. So feel free to screenshot the screen here with the explanation here. But to answer your question, we have to remember that nice isn't some natural truth. It's a social construct, right? It's a made up rule, something society that includes all of us. We are society collectively. We created and agreed upon to keep things orderly, comfortable, and frankly, predictable. And that agreement isn't always conscious, but that doesn't mean that we aren't still each contributing to the perpetuation of that societal rule, that construct that nice people get ahead, that nice is the way to be, that should be our default, that niceness should be king over anything and everything else. And so while it sounds harmless to many people, even virtuous, nice is control dressed up as virtue. And that's why I talk about not waiting for permission to do equity work. Niceness, it keeps us waiting. It tells us to stay polite, agreeable, and quiet until someone else says it's our turn to speak or to act. But as you and I know, equity doesn't happen on someone else's schedule. And in this moment, leading with urgency looks like choosing nerve instead of nice. And the opposite of nice, as you said, the antithesis is not mean. I'm never asking people to be mean. And some people, that is their immediate assumption. But it really is nerve. And nerve is boldness, it's fortitude, it's audacity, it's speaking up when silence feels safer, challenging the status quo, even at a cost. And you've got to calculate the cost for yourself, and holding boundaries even when people will call you or label you difficult or angry or a challenge to work with. Labels I've heard and still hear to this day over and over again. And the cost of waiting, it's paid by the people with the least power. And the cost of nice is also paid for by the people with the least power, those who can't afford for us to be nice about injustice, about inequity. And waiting keeps systems intact and inequities firmly in place right where they are. And so every day that we delay, someone is denied opportunity, dignity, or even safety, whether that safety is physical or psychological or in the workplace. And so I choose, and I hope we all choose nerve to act now, because when the stakes are high and the resistance is real, and it is, nice won't change the world. But my hope is that nerve just might be the thing that helps to change it. And up next, I thought I'd share some of the framing of what does nice look like versus nerve for our friends listening in this masterclass. But nice, many of you may be familiar with the definition of nice: polite, kind, pleasing, appropriate, right? Things that those don't sound too bad, right? And the definition of nerve, again, fortitude, strength, boldness, audacity, the courage to move forward. And people often ask me, well, what's the difference? What does it look like? And so feel free to screenshot this too. All of this is in the book as well. But if nice is, conformity or that inauthentic self, to me, nerve is something I talk about instead of authentic self, which I don't like that framing or that language. I often talk about chosen self, right? Because it's not, I am a Black disabled woman. It is not always safe for me to be authentically me. But if I can move in spaces to be my chosen self, and my chosen self is different. If I'm in a place of worship, if I'm at work, if I'm at the grocery store, my chosen self is very different depending on the room that I'm in and the audience for my own safety, quite frankly. Some other examples, over apologizing, suppressing personal
Yes.
needs. So this, I hope, just gives people some of that language to understand, okay, well, if nice isn't the thing to be, and what's the problem with nice, what is the antithesis? And so nerve and giving people this language to acknowledge and to know and to understand is part of what I hope to do. And some other examples, if nice says, I don't want to cause conflict, so I'll stay quiet, nerve might say something like, I can voice my perspective without needing everyone to agree. Period. No caveats, no additional, filler words, just, you know what, I can voice my perspective. Everyone may not agree. And you need to find a way to have the tools to let that be okay. Another would be if nice says, no worries, especially when someone oversteps your boundaries, right? This happens a lot. Nerve might say, actually, that doesn't work for me. And again, letting that be enough. No, that doesn't work for me. I'm going to hold the line on this boundary. That is a version and iteration of practicing nerve.
And speaking of language, since we're here, we did get a question in the comments from Tina. Nice is control or as virtue, wanting clarity on what was the label you used. I know.
The label used. I don't think I understand the question. And I'm
So
trying
Tina,
to go to the chat.
okay.
And I'll go to them afterwards too. Nice
Okay.
is control dressed up as a virtue, I think is what I said.
Just up there. Okay.
And I also
Gotcha.
said, I think of niceness as, it helps to see the line and then the question mark. Niceness as a velvet glove over an iron fist. I'm a very visual learner, and so I have to picture things, and that's how I picture it, like this iron fist that kind of slams down, and the velvet is the lie and the belief that, oh no, it's just something soft and nice, it's okay. But actually, no, if that hits you in the face, it's gonna hurt.
No, absolutely. And when we talk about kind of this equity work, it's not one size fits all. So it requires different tiers of responsibility. Now, depending on your identities, depending on your access, and also like your role in general. Can you break that down for us? Like, what does accountability look like for people in positions of power versus those with marginalized identities, multiple marginalized identities, or for senior leaders even versus like individual contributors?
Yes. And this is also in the book. I call it the conditioning matrix. And it's prettier in the book, but it's easier in a presentation to read it this way. And so, what is the point of this? So, equity work isn't one size fits all, as you said, because none of us come into it from the same starting point, and not all of us have the exact same needs, right? And that's where this conditioning matrix in the book comes in. It helps us to see how systems of niceness have shaped us from the jump and continue to get reinforced at personal, interpersonal, and institutional levels. And I always use myself as an example. I grew up as a missionary kid. My parents were ministers. And so I grew up in a very evangelical Christian faith, and that shaped a lot of my conditioning, who I am, and why niceness was very much prioritized. And if you have a similar background of evangelical Christianity, I think you'll understand the prioritization of niceness over nerve, over speaking up, over anything else. And people always, it's funny, and I say it funnily, but I, as a child, was always told, don't put a question mark where God puts a period. And that is sort of an example of this idea of being conditioned that it's not nice to ask hard questions. It's not nice to go there. Just let it be. And I think many people in various ways, whether you grew up in a faith group or not, are conditioned with some of those lessons that bleed into how we move through the world, even in the workplace and into adulthood. And so at the personal level in this matrix, we internalize scripts like, don't question authority. That was a big one for me that I'm still unlearning and unpacking every day at my big old age. Or be grateful that you have a seat at the table. That one comes up a lot. And so for folks with marginalized identities, those messages can often become, and they have been for me, survival strategies, right? Performing niceness to avoid harm or rejection of some sort. At the interpersonal level, those messages get reinforced in real time. It can look like tone policing, being talked over, vague feedback like, you're just not quite ready. What does that mean? What does that mean? Give me an example. Not quite ready. How so? Those are all subtle ways that we're told to stay small, agreeable, quiet. And at the institutional level, policies and cultural norms. So things like best fit hiring or moving conflict behind closed doors, those things reward conformity and they punish people who choose to show up with nerve. So when we talk about accountability, it has to reflect those different realities. And so for people with marginalized identities, accountability often looks like self-reflection and boundary setting. It's asking, where have I been conditioned to stay quiet for survival? And where can I safely choose alignment with my values, my personhood, over approval, the approval of others, which is often what NICE seeks. For people with power and privilege, accountability is redistribution and risk taking. It means noticing when you're benefiting from silence in the room or in a relationship, when systems are protecting your comfort, and then using your power and privilege, your influence to challenge exactly that. You can hire differently. You can fund differently. You can set different cultural norms when you have a seat at that table with all the power and privilege that some of us have more than others. For very senior leaders in the workplace, accountability can be dismantling institutional patterns, right? Baking equity into the business strategy and integrating DEI into every function and ensuring everyone understands that they have a role to play in what belonging and safety looks like in our workplace, and finding ways to reward that ambassadorship and that participation and nerve rather than punishing it, labeling people as, difficult or challenging to work with. For individual contributors, it might look like practicing allyship in everyday moments. Don't ever equate small to insignificant. So how you respond when someone gets talked over, whether you normalize feedback that tone polices, or how you question the way we've always done things, is a way that you can show up differently and practice nerve just as an individual person. And it's layered because our conditioning, as this matrix shows, is very layered. And the goal, my goal is never shaming people. It's giving people clarity, giving them the language and the framing to understand this so they can unlearn and then relearn. And once we name where all of those scripts and those conditioning has come from, we can choose differently depending on our identities, our access, and our roles. And I learned this lesson early, right? I mentioned as a kid, I blurted out everything about those braids that I was feeling in that moment. I was in practical mode while the twins were in emotional conversation mode. And my conditioning said, be sweet, be agreeable. But even then, there was this little girl who couldn't stay silent when something didn't make sense. And it didn't make sense to me why they were squirming and why they wanted these braids if it hurt their head. My thought was, well, if it hurts your head, just don't do it and then your head won't hurt. And so my version of practicing nerve in that moment was to just say that. To me, that was a solution, right? That practical mode of me. The solution here is don't get those braids, obviously. And so today, equity work is my grown up version of that same lesson, right? Learning which scripts to unbraid, if you will, and how to speak with nerve, even when it's uncomfortable, because that's where lives change.
Absolutely. Now, Amira, this is a lot for any individual to understand, no matter what level of power they have in whatever organization or even family structure. And in doing this work, we are hit with a lot of external pressure, a lot of questions, even a lot of questions about your motives for doing this work.
Yeah.
And we see it every single day. So, my question for you, because it's so weighty, because it's so costly, and it can even be very draining to your soul, what are you doing to protect your peace, to recharge, and really prioritize rest and joy along this way?
This work is tough because it's not just strategy and spreadsheets, right? It's hearts and minds, and often it's generational pain for some people more than others. And that
Mhm.
is weighty work, as you said, and it takes something from you. And if you're not intentional about how you refill yourself, it will keep taking. And so for me, I protect my peace by using the tools that I share with people, which is why I wrote a whole book, because I thought, these tools really have helped me and they continue to help me. I use them actively. It's not a past tense. And so I use that matching principle, right, to know what kind of conversation am I in so that I'm not wasting and expending my emotional energy solving a practical problem or throwing data at someone who actually needs empathy. And I also zoom out, right? And I remind myself that this resistance isn't always about me alone. It's about systems, expectations, and conditioning. And that perspective, it keeps me from carrying things that aren't mine to hold. I also flip the script for myself. I don't ask, will they like this? Will they like me? I've moved beyond that. I still have to actively do it. I actively move beyond it in each instance. It's less likely that I naturally default to, well, will they like me if I do this, if I say this? And instead, I ask, is this aligned with my values? Right? Is this aligned with my values? I want alignment in life, not approval. And that's how I do it. So I choose alignment over approval as I give myself pause and I ask that question, how will I feel about me? Will I like me? Depending
Mhm.
on whether or not I practice nice or nerve in this moment, that matters more than what the crowd thinks. And that feels a whole lot lighter to me. And I've learned to move into that space. It's not easy. I'm not saying that. You have to unlearn and relearn over time, because being liked is not the same as being effective. And
Absolutely.
nerve, the kind of courage that this work takes, it demands rest just as much as action. And joy, you said the word joy, so I schedule joy like it's a meeting with the CEO of my life, me, because it is. So whether it's family time, forest bathing, nature therapy, or just complete stillness, I treat joy as a non-negotiable. And in fact, we just went to Lake Tahoe. I wanted to just float on the Truckee River in the sunshine. And so we did exactly that. We went out to nature. It's about 3 hours away. So we drove up and we floated on the river for 3 days and got some sunshine and some forest bathing and some nature therapy. And that's part of a huge part, actually. We're always outside in the national parks and things. That's a huge part of how I find joy, how I reset, and how I resist.
Now, for your East Coast friends that are part of the Northeastern Corridor, the area from the DMV to New York, can you explain a little bit what forest bathing is?
Oh, yes, it is literally being outside and one with nature. And it's a lot of like
Okay.
grounding and somatic techniques. So, like, I'll take my shoes off and step into the grass or nature. And literally, it's like just being in the forest, and you forest bathe in the silence and the quiet. Yes, you just let the nature and the silence wash over you. You forest bathe.
Okay.
Thank you for the question.
I've learned a little bit more today. So, and I want to add last question because we want to make sure we leave space for questions from the audience. So let's say I have a magic wand. Now, we already know that the book is going to be wildly popular, but
Thank you. Thank
now
you.
let's say that it's absolutely transformative. So we got
Mm,
national leaders, world leaders, they are just brought to tears by this and the conversations that it sparked, and they're now speaking truth to power, and change is starting to happen like in a real way, not just performative way. This progress is happening. So now it's 10 years from now, and your daughter Audrey is 22. So in that future, what does the
mm.
world look like for her?
So many things. In that world, my daughter Audrey is not told to smile more in order to be heard and accepted. She doesn't have to make herself small or soft to make others comfortable. It's a world where she can speak truth without being labeled difficult, where disagreement is actually not dangerous, but it's actually expected, and where alignment over approval is the norm for us all. And she can choose her own path without carrying that generational weight of performing niceness just to be safe and to belong. And to be frank, I'm going to go there this morning where I am. She doesn't have to worry about the people around her, her own company, side eyeing her book launch because they're scared to back a authentically unapologetic Black woman in a world that still clutches its pearls at all three of those realities. So she would get to lead, speak, and create without doing the mental math of, will this cost me my job? Will this cost me my seat at the table? Because by then we've built new tables and she owns hers outright. And that's the world that I'm writing toward.
I'm excited for that world too. And I know it can definitely happen. So thank you so much for really authentically sharing such maybe personal, even vulnerable parts of you to really bring this conversation to life. So right now we have at least one question in the Q&A box. So this one's from Angelina. Thank you so much. She shares, in addition to her HR work for Sonoma County, she's also a student, and she would love to share your book and info with her school colleagues. Can she have permission? And that this is
Oh,
wonderful.
absolutely. Permission granted. Thank you for the kindness of asking. Please share widely. My hope is that this book makes it into everyone's hands because while there is a lot of focus on the workplace, these tools and these concepts are expansive. They are useful to anyone, whether you're in school, in high school, in college, if you are in a place of worship, if you are just on the board in your community, if you are on the PTA at school, these tools are useful to you on how to practice nerve over nice. So yes, please share widely. You can get the book wherever books are sold, preferably not, the big box Amazon people. Bookshop is great. You can support indie booksellers. And coming up soon in August, my friends at Porchlight Books are going to do 38% off for a very long time, up until the book launches in October. And 38% means it's $14.23. So if you like a discount, head to Porchlight Books. They're going to be doing my book at a discount there. So you can save some coins and still get all the wonderful learning. But yes, thank you. And I will make sure to continue to put the link in the chat where you can find lots of different links to where to get the book.
Let's see. And we've got two more questions. So I have this one's from, I believe, Abdul. I think the whole name is put together, so I won't say all of it, but I have a co-founder who's also a CTO of a tech product. Though our time zones are different, she always talks about her appointment in the other startup, which I've been accommodating. I'm now finding it not accommodating anymore because it's affecting my own startup. What do I do?
Ooh, that is going to be a practical conversation that we are going to have to sit down and talk about expectations and how can we support one another's mutual goals, right? You have these goals at this company, but we have a mutual goal here at this company. And I think that that is an honest sit down and a practical conversation about boundaries and timing and how can we mutually support one another. So lean into the practical conversation element about literally the logistics of how do we make this work for both of us. And yes, so I think we're going to let our friends at Graphy do a little bit of an explanation on a very cool boot camp that I think all of you here will be interested to know, and then we can come back to some more Q&A. So we'll kick it back over to Elizabeth and our Graphy friends.
All right, this has all been super fascinating, and the philosophy of empowering yourself and finding ways to operate in the world in a way that resonates with your passions is really important. Thanks for coming, Elena. So I want to share a really amazing opportunity coming to us from our friends at Graphy. They are on a mission to empower creators. They want to make sure give you everything that you need to be successful in their Power 20 bootcamp. I'd like them to introduce you to their AI-powered creator-centered learning management platform. They're helping individuals, coaches, trainers, aspiring creators, authors, consultants, anyone that really wants to scale their business with expert guidance. They have you covered. They want to help you to be successful. In this 30-day boot there you go. In this 30-day boot camp, you have the opportunity to learn from industry experts. You also have access to their tools. That 30 days gives you exposure to these amazing tools, AI driven, as I said. You're going to get hands-on experience with the Graphy support staff. They are there with you every step of the way. And you also get to set up your own forward-facing platform, which becomes your media hub or launch pad for your business. Here's some bootcamp alumni, some additional social proof for you. Ash and Nick launched their furniture flipping course platform, Beyond School, was able to sell 600 courses. And then we have Ruth Langhorne, who has helped over 5,000 women to be successful in their consulting, coaching, teaching, and strategizing. Some additional statistics for you, over 240 total enrollments, and they've graduated almost 200. About a dozen of my clients have taken this, and they have all given me rave reviews about the program. They are, however, limiting it to just 20. They want to make sure that they're able to give you the one-on-one attention that you deserve. What's included? It is power packed full of lots of goodies. You get 1 free month of access to their tools. There's a website builder, as I said, course builder, email marketing, webinar funnel, also unlimited landing pages, Zoom classes, digital downloads, anything that you can think of. It's basically a business in a box. And as I mentioned before, it is AI driven. So as someone that worked in learning and development for over 20 years, I will tell you, it's probably one of the easiest tools I've demoed. And that's saying a lot because I've used a lot of very rickety tools, even starting in the early 2000s. This blows those out of the water. I really wish I would have had these when I first started working in learning and development. This is a 4-day workshop. The folks at Graphy are going to drop those live session dates in the chat for you. However, never fear if you can't make the live sessions. These sessions are recorded and you have lifetime access. They're going to help you understand your niche, how to create, market, and sell courses, webinars, consulting, whatever you're trying to showcase, you're able to do that, and they want to show you how. They give you an individualized, personalized onboarding experience, and you have an assigned success manager who's able to shepherd you through their process. Certificate as well as a launch on Times Square billboard awaits you. And this is the pricing. The spots are limited to 20. You can reserve your spot now for just $20. There is a full money back guarantee, which means that you can pay the balance of that, which totals $49 at your onboarding appointment. If you don't feel that you want to go forward at the onboarding appointment, they will go ahead and give you your money back. No questions asked. This is at a great value. It's 90% off. And the folks at Graphy will begin by dropping the link in the chat for you to sign up if you want like to register. They'll also be reaching out to you in your messages just to make sure you don't have any questions. I'm going to turn it back to the ladies so that they can continue with Q&A.
Right. Thank you so much. So we also did receive another question, Amira. If you're in
Awesome.
a leadership role, how can you encourage, ooh, this one's good. Thank you, Faiza. How can you encourage more nerve on your team within a culture that prioritizes niceness?
Oh, I love this question. Thank you, Fiza. Fiza's a good friend. I love Fiza. Um, Definitely try to frame courage as care, right? The reason we practice nerve, and this is true, this is why I practice nerve, because I believe that it is the most kind thing we can and should do as opposed to niceness, right? I speak up and I challenge ideas and old ways and even people as an act of commitment to my team's success. It's not because I want to be difficult or the challenging person, it's because I really believe that there's something more that can be here. There's something more that we can be and achieve. And so I frame nerve and the courage to speak up as care. That's why I do it. And that's why I talk about in the book that I'm not asking people to throw out kindness. Kindness is actually still the aim and the goal, but kindness is very different from niceness. And the way I explain it to people, this was a tweet in 2015, and I don't have that bird app anymore, so I can't link it for you. But back in 2015, someone explained this as the difference between Californians and New Yorkers. And I really liked that. As a native Californian, I agree. So they said Californians are nice, New Yorkers are kind. And what they meant was, Californians, let's say that you are outside walking the streets and you are freezing cold because you forgot a jacket and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so cold. A Californian will say, oh, I'm sorry you're so cold. That's terrible. And then leave you and walk away. If you're in New York doing the same thing, you forgot your jacket, a New Yorker will very gruffly say, are you stupid? Why did you leave the house without a coat? Here, take my coat. Don't do this again, and walk away. The New Yorker solved your problem, right? They took action. And that's the difference. Kindness is about action, about moving towards creating a change for you. Niceness is just empty. There's nothing. It might feel and seem like empathy, but there's no change that's been created for you. And I really liked that framing because, again, I'm a very visual, I need an example. I'm like, tell me a story, give me an example. And that story, an example of the difference between Californians and New Yorkers, I wholeheartedly agree with. And it really solidified for me, okay, I get what the difference between nice and kind is. So kindness is always still the goal. What's the action we can take on behalf of people if we truly care and truly want them to have a different set of experiences? And nerve is the way that we can do that. And so in a culture that values niceness, I think helping to reframe and redefine and give the language of, well, what do we mean by nice? Because if what we really mean is kind, let's talk about how you get to kindness. And kindness is action. And sometimes it's very much the action of saying the hard things and not being silent.
Yeah, not too much on the New Yorkers, Amira. They don't get to bathe in the forest that much. All right. So they're doing the best that they can. We have
I love
another
me some
question.
New Yorkers. I do. They're some of my favorite people.
We have another question. Actually, from one of our old colleagues, Bethany Reynolds. She asks, how do you recharge or refill your cup to continue practicing nerve, especially in a work culture in general that doesn't support on your work the way they might support the work of white colleagues?
Mm. I think certainly one answer that has been useful and helpful to me is to find the people who get it, because sometimes that understanding, that care, and that encouragement will never come from that company and from that leadership. But I have found, even in my own workplace, kindred souls like Levita and many others, and Bethany, who was our colleague up until May, right? Up until just recently, but finding the people who can help to fill your cup, who understand, because sometimes just having a space to have the conversation about what's happening can be you release it, right? It's again those somatic practices, like being able to release it and move through it and talk through it can itself be a form of taking action and care, even if you know on the other end within that company you're not going to get the response, the respect, or the understanding of what it means to practice nerve in the space of that organization. But you may get that understanding, that respect in the one-to-one individual relationships with the people around you who get it and who can help to fill your cup and to keep your spirits high when they aren't so much so on your own. And also, you can leave. We are not trees and we are not planted. And sometimes it just means we should go. And I'm a firm believer in that.
Well, Amira, there's 4 minutes left. We've gone through the questions.
Love it.
And then thank you so much for this time. And want to thank Graphy, and I just want to turn it back over to you and to the team.
All right. So this has been a amazingly insightful conversation. The power of nice. Don't we all know that, especially as women, Black women particularly, that's been something that's been indoctrinated, and we need to start dismantling and deconstructing some of these paradigms. So thank you, Keith. Thank you for being here. She definitely is a rock star. Thank you to Amira for sharing the knowledge from your book and being so transparent about your journey. Thank you, Lavita, being an amazing facilitator. Thank you to the folks at Graphy for helping this to all take place. There are some pending payments, so please make sure that you complete those before you drop off the call today. Thank you to those that stuck with us for the full hour. We retained almost everybody. So thank you all for your attention and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. It's only Tuesday, so go ahead and make it a good week, the rest of it. Thank you all for being here. Take it
Thanks,
easy.
everyone.
Bye-bye.